What's up, y'all? Welcome to Undrunken. I'm your host, Courtney, and if you've ever questioned your relationship with booze or the world's obsession with it, then this podcast is for you. Whether you're sober curious, Cali sober, or just sick of feeling like shit, Undrunken is your new home. New episodes drop every Monday, so hit follow, tell your friend, and let's get undrunken together. Awesome. Well, let's jump in.
Okay.
So thank you, Tim, for joining. I'm so excited that Patricia connected you with Undrunken and that you reached out to share your story. Why don't you jump in and just tell us a little bit about you and maybe start off with why you're here on Undrunken?
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I'll be honest, I was a little nervous about this for a bit, and I spoke with a couple friends and I said, "Hey, thinking about doing this podcast interview, and I'm not sure if it's a good idea." And they said that's exactly why you should do it. Because, because of sort of my complex relationship with alcohol and the fact that it feels so vulnerable is exactly why I should be here. So I'm from Boston. I live in Arizona right now. I'm in Scottsdale. I've been here about 3 years. Um, I guess I'll just kind of jump into sort of a little bit of the quick history, and then, any details you're looking for, you can jump in on. I grew up in sort of relationships and with myself where alcohol was just part of the lifestyle, and even I would say abusing it, overusing it was just part of the lifestyle. There wasn't much questioning of that a lot of times, and especially once I got into college, that was just very normal. I didn't understand that I like had a relationship with it, right? But I did, and I didn't, in having that relationship, I was using it to either, enhance an experience, to dull emotions, to make myself comfortable, and I didn't really understand that for a long time. And I feel fortunate, where some people don't get this. I got a catalyst. The catalyst itself is not fortunate, but in terms of my relationship with alcohol, it was. When I was 26, I got very sick. I have Lyme disease, and with that, a lot of other things. I know you've had some people on here who have had some complex chronic illnesses, and so there's a lot of. It's usually not just one thing, and so at 26, I was, before I got sick, I was running a business, part of a team, doing a lot, and professionally doing extremely well in a seemingly amazing relationship, had a great social life, exercising 7 days a week, you name it. From the outside, everything was kind of perfect. But if it were perfect, it wouldn't crumble so quickly. And it did. And in the span of a month, I went from living that to not being able to get out of bed. And so things really happened quickly. And one of the things that I really struggled with was uh, letting go of alcohol, even though I was so sick, because to me, it was sort of a symbol of the social lifestyle I was living. And if I let go of that, it was kind of admitting that I was extremely sick and that maybe things were slipping away from me. So I was having a very tough time with that. And so that was one of the first things. If I was having a day when I was feeling pretty good, I'd be like, let's go get a couple beers. And looking back on that, I think, what a fucking idiot. Because, that's like the last thing I should have been doing. But I didn't even understand myself as I do now. And I didn't understand what in those moments maybe I was using alcohol for, which was to mask the fact that I was scared of how sick I was. I was anxious about a lot of things that were going on. Um, for the next couple of years, I slowly kind of stepped away from alcohol more and more. And I would say the past 3 years, I probably have had combined maybe 5 or 10 drinks. The past last year, 2024, I didn't have a drink. And it's not something I really think about anymore. At first, I would say like in 2018, 2019, I would go to weddings and I would feel so uncomfortable. And now I go and I'm like, I don't need alcohol to have an amazing time. In fact, it's kind of nice to not need anything and to just be raw in the moments and thoroughly soak in everything that's happening. And so, yeah, letting go of alcohol, and we'll get into this a bit, is has both been really beneficial for my physical health, but it's also been incredibly beneficial for my growth as an individual. It's allowed me to, and at first it was extremely difficult to not have anything maybe masking some feelings and experiences, but now I see that, before I was scared that without alcohol I was going to be missing out, and now I see that I had that backwards, that alcohol was actually causing me to miss out on so much.
Wow, Tim, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that so eloquently. I mean, I feel like so much that I connected to, and I think other people will, just with how challenging it was and that identity association. Um, I certainly myself, right? Like, would never in a million years would I have thought that I would be a champion of being an alcohol-free lifestyle, given how much I enjoyed it in my 20s. Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Like, what were some of the challenges? You touched on it a little bit, but I really think that those are things that people like to hear about, right? Especially those that are just starting out. It is harder in the beginning, right? What were some of those challenges, and how did you deal with it?
So challenges in terms of being without alcohol or substance or what have you. So yeah, so having something to reach to, I just think about, and less of a, because I think it's important to mention this, and it's part of what you said. There's no judgment, because I think about, for myself, um, it required a huge force and catalyst for me to go from where I was to where I am. And I think that's part of what gets in the way of some of having some more of these conversations. It's thinking that there's judgment. And if you've really gone through it and really take full assessment of yourself, you realize, well, how could I judge someone? Because it took an external event or catalyst for me to have the courage to kind of face my relationship with alcohol and be like, yeah, I think I'm actually okay without it. Without that, I don't know where I'd be. So um, I think it's scary, and for me it was, because just thinking whether it was reaching for it because I was having an anxious day, or because everyone else was going to the bar, or bachelor party kind of thing. But also, I just think about the more just normal way of doing things for a lot of people. You have a long day, and that's your sort of period of like, okay, after say 6 or 7, I've worked, I've made dinner. This is sort of that time where I go from the doing to the relaxing. And sometimes it's sort of a symbol of a break in the day, like that, your glass of wine, your beer, your cocktail. And I think sometimes without that, it can be hard to create that break. Does that make sense?
100%.
And also just having something to maybe amplify that feeling of relaxation makes sense. Because especially with how stressful our world is, there's things that are amplifying the stress. To have something to amplify the feelings of like, I need to calm down. So I think not having that, especially when I was feeling really unwell, and I was scared about what was going on in my body. I was having a lot of anxiety, and insomnia and all these things. And to not have something to, or at least the thing that I've reached to in the past without even realizing it. I wasn't even conscious that I was doing it. But over time, I was like, oh, that's what I was doing to dull that feeling.
Yeah. And how did you cope with that? Like, what I love that you talk about that being the catalyst, for your evening to relax. I've actually had people ask me about that, like, well, how do you unwind, right? How did you cope with it? How did you unwind? How did you create that set trigger point for your shift in the evening?
At first, I honestly don't know. I don't think I've thought about that. Um, I think everything was just, there was so much happening quickly. And honestly, I was emotionally, I was not doing well. I was not in a good place. I don't think that, alcohol was not like the only piece. There was a lot of other things going on. I lost my identity. I was losing my identity in terms of who I was professionally. I was just plain and simple. I was sick. I was unwell, not sleeping a lot, right? There were just so many things going on, but I didn't know what was going on with my health, right? So I was having a lot of frustration and anger and all these things. And honestly, I didn't have, and I think that's sometimes what people struggle with is they don't have another outlet or they don't have another place to go. And so what I can share is like what I do now,
Mhm.
but it's taken a long time to learn because you have to, for me, it's taken removing and being willing to, I think about when people do dry January, that's tough. Like that's basically, to me, that's like a hangover. It's like I'm gonna willingly do a hangover for a month. Why would you do that? All you're doing is the really difficult part of the experience of what life might be like without substance. And if you keep going, then you start to think, oh, maybe there's some benefits here. But if you only do it for a month, all you're thinking about is, I got to distract the shit out of myself because this sucks. So
February 1st is right around the corner. I just got to
truly
get,
though, and it's good. Like, and I don't want to say that it's not good. It's great to, um,
but you're 100% right. Like that first month, like as a, I would say, um, habitual drinker, that first month is the hardest.
yeah.
And then it's like usually like around month 2 and 3, that's when you really start to go, whoa, and then 6 months, at least for me, these were like milestones that were just right around the corner of that dry January.
So it took the willingness to let it go. It took the willingness to explore, my relationship with alcohol, when I reach for it, why I reach for it, and then like, what are some healthy alternatives, and then establishing sort of the automatic responses of just doing them. So I don't even think about it now, but at night I make tea. So that's kind of my other, I guess, rather than alcohol, I have tea. And that's very soothing for me. It's not just the tea itself, it's like the process of making it. It's very therapeutic. Um,
Okay.
I'll meditate. I might put on some calming music. I just do, I change what I'm wearing. I go from, even if I'm wearing, because I work from home, I might already be wearing sweatpants. I'll change to another pair of sweatpants. I just do little things like that because I think it's important to your mind, to yourself, to create that sort of line in the sand of, okay, I've been doing work, etc., and now I'm stopping. Because, and this is one of those things that I've talked to a number of people about. I don't know that people are always conscious about that alcohol is that break. And when you can start to use other things for it, just, sit down and take 3 deep breaths, right? You can just do really simple things. And the more you do them, the more you actually crave doing them at those points in the day because you're like, this is when I get to reset and then step into a really calming part of my day.
So what are some of the unexpected joys that you found once you had alcohol less in your life?
So I got to just experience everything, um, which can sound scary, but I think, so I think about some of the people I know, some of my teachers who talk about grief, for example, right? So the purpose of grief, or experiencing it isn't just to go through like the darkness, it's because on the other side is joy. And so I think about that with this, and that's essentially what I benefit from now. I have really deep gratitude for all sorts of things, in ways I never experienced before. Deeper joy. I like the taste of water. just like little things like that, right? Which is so weird to some people, but I just enjoy the feeling of like hydrating my body, of taking care of myself. One of the things that has been such a gift for me is getting to know myself.
Mm.
And there's been a lot of other elements with it, but I think if I was still drinking in the way I was, I would not be able to know myself. That sounds simple, but I think so many people go through life never having the opportunity to truly comfortably sit with themselves and know themselves and have that deep sort of intuition of what your needs, your wants, your desires, your dreams are. It's transformed so much that the past 6 months, I've felt a very deep self-love. And that's been such a breakthrough for me. Um, for people who knew me 5, 10, 20 years ago, they would, they understand how monumental that is for me. And I do think that, removing alcohol and having this willingness to look at the dark parts of myself, but in order to be able to accept and love the best parts of myself has been such a gift.
That is so beautifully said. You mentioned your teachers, and you sound very self-aware, and I'm just curious, like, what are some of those resources or kinds of teachers that you saw that have helped you get there?
So I spoke with one of them today, actually, interestingly. So I spoke with my spiritual mentor today. She's in New Hampshire. Um, she actually helped me with I actually started working with her in 2020, and it was probably at a time when a lot of people were experiencing anxiety through COVID and things like that. I had that coupled with some other things with my health. And I went to her to learn some deeper meditation practices, embodiment practices, things like that. She's done a lot more for me in terms of both being a healer and sort of a spiritual guide in my life. Right now, I'm going to her to talk about just some sort of blocks I'm having with my own sort of spirituality. But she's just been someone who, I feel like she has thousands of years of experience crammed into her 50 years on the planet. Someone that was really helpful for me was an energy healer back in Boston who he was kind of the first person to help me tap into my own power uh, early on, like less than a year into being sick, just trying to get me to let go and trust myself. And that was a huge step for me. I am surrounded, because of the work I do, I'm surrounded by mindset coaches, grief experts, therapists, all sorts of both mental and physical alternative health experts. And they know this, I hope, but I get almost really as much from them as I give them, because I'm just constantly fed incredible information from them that feeds my soul, really, and helps me sort of stay on the path.
I think that is so important. You're surrounded by good, right? Putting good things in, right?
Yeah.
Um, how did you talked about it being challenging to be like at a wedding and not drinking, whereas now it's no big deal. And I think a lot of people share that where, the longer you go without it, the less you're like, oh, well, water's just delicious, right? In the beginning, how did you navigate that? What did you drink? What did you do?
So, I know some people like to just get like a club soda with lime, and I think that that can be great, or another great thing to do if they have cocktails is like bitters, just the bitters in like seltzer water with a piece of fruit, because that looks like a cocktail. When you're first starting out, I think that that can be good. Um, I don't like the phrase fake it till you make it. With something like this, I think it's applicable because I think it's really hard. I was at these weddings by myself. I didn't have a partner. If you're in that situation too and you don't have a partner, I think there has to be, you have to do what you have to do to make it through. And then once you get a few under your belt, you're like, all right, I can do this. But the first few, it's like, do what you have to do.
Yeah.
Some of the things that I do now in those kind of situations are, so I don't have to do that anymore. I'm just very comfortable in what I'm doing. I don't need like the club soda with lime. I don't really like club soda, so I don't want to drink it. So I'm not going to do that. But again, if you need to do that starting out, do it. That's what I would say to someone. So I I know going to a wedding, I get a sense and I think through who's going to be there, and I reach out to them before and just have a conversation with them, make sure that I'm going to get some one-on-one time and know kind of who my people are so that if things are getting tricky, I can grab them and say, hey, can we get some air? And they're going to know possibly why. And if I need to, I can be specific with them before, like, hey, this can be tough for me sometimes at weddings. If I grab you, is it okay? Like, is it okay if, we get some one-on-one time? But at least being clear in your mind of like, hey, here are the 3, 4, 5, 6 people at the wedding who have my back and don't judge me. If anything, are happy that I'm making the choices I do for myself. The other thing I would say is it's okay to like go in and out. Hypothetically, I'm thinking of like the night before a wedding where it's just cocktail hour, but for 8 hours. So, you can go, it's okay to go for half an hour and leave. It's also okay to like go for 45 minutes, step out and do something else, come back again, step out. It's all about what works for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people do this at weddings and people don't really notice. A lot of people do this at all sorts of functions, really. And we sometimes think like people are keeping an eye on us. They're not. I do notice that I have noticed some people sometimes, observing like in other people's businesses, but those are not your people
Right.
in these situations. So that if they're, looking to talk to you about more intimate details about alcohol, like you don't need to talk to them about that.
Does it bother you if people ask you about it or like prod you or
Not anymore.
yeah.
It did before because it would sometimes, I think this is both real, but then also a little bit in my head, it would sometimes feel like they're maybe looking to make me feel bad.
Mm.
But the other thing I've realized is, around certain people in my life, and I'm obviously not going to say who, but around certain people in my life, they're uncomfortable with me drinking because it makes them uncomfortable that I'm not drinking. I'm not doing anything wrong. It's their relationship with alcohol. And like maybe subconsciously, they don't like how much they drink. And so the only way they're going to be comfortable is if everyone else is drinking as much as them. So if someone's not drinking, they're suddenly like, oh shoot, am I doing something wrong? He better start drinking or else I'm going to start having real thoughts. That happens.
I had not the first time I've heard that. Yeah. Um, what do you think is like the number one thing someone who is curious about not drinking, like what is the one thing you would want to tell them?
So I would say, let me just take a step back to lead into this. So I do think that one of the challenges with this, everything we're talking about is it's very black and white. And it's essentially you drink or you don't. There's not a lot of gray. I do have a number of people I talk to about this. The only males I talk to are in AA. I fortunately have a number of female friends who aren't, and I really like that. But I do think the challenge, and this is just my observation, is if a guy's not drinking, they think he has a problem. And I don't know if that happens for women. It might. That's not something that I can necessarily speak to as clearly, but I do observe that with men. And I think that's part of what gets in the way of men having the conversations or feeling like they can, because it's just, okay, well, if I do want to talk about this, the only place I can talk about it safely is in AA. I don't like that. I think that it's stopping a lot of people who might want to explore the fact that they don't have a good relationship with alcohol, that maybe they want to slow down their drinking. They're like, but if I bring it up to a guy, I'm going to get shamed for it.
Mm.
So again, I would think about the people in your life who you've had those more intimate conversations with, and maybe it's a female to start, because I have some amazing guy friends, but it's taken a lot of time to feel safe with the right people. My more intimate relationships tend to be with females. And I don't think that that's surprising, but I think, maybe for females, obviously, having that conversation with females. For guys, finding someone, whether you already know a guy in your life you can talk to, or a female friend, and understanding it. You can also, if you know someone who is an AA who you trust, you can talk to someone who's an AA and say, I don't think I, identify as an alcoholic, but I'm trying to understand my own relationship with alcohol. Where would you point me?
Yeah.
Just getting curious about the people in your life who you've been able to have safe dialogue with other things, about other things, about children, about challenges at work, about marriage, about family. Where have you gone where you've felt compassion and empathy and understanding, and you feel like you can approach a conversation around alcohol with?
Talk to me about the fun. Like, I love that you said, like, I don't need a drink to have fun. Like, talk to me about some of the fun in your life, because I think there's a pretty big misconception that those of us that don't drink are boring. And I've yet to meet a boring non-drinker or interview one. So tell us about the fun.
Interestingly, I have no basis for this opinion other than my own thoughts, and my own experience with alcohol. But, it's like, when you don't drink, you're confined and you're rigid. And then when you do drink, then you can have fun. And I don't know if that's real, but I kind of think about it that way. And so then, well, if I'm not drinking, then I can always be fun. And I think just that general attitude for me, over time, I've just allowed people to see more of who I really am. And, in my work, in somewhat, so I'm a business coach, so I tend to be kind of serious, but when I tend to be pretty serious, but as my clients get to know me, they're like, no, this guy's kind of a clown. So, I don't know if you're talking about my general attitude, or like, what do I do for fun?
Kind of a little bit of both. I love what I'm hearing you say is that not drinking has allowed you to just be authentically you, which
Yes.
is fun.
Yes.
And that reminds me of Gentry that I interviewed, and she said, you know, something along the lines of, drinking was an excuse to just be wild,
Yeah.
right?
Listen, you don't need alcohol to be wild. Like, I can tell you that. You don't need an excuse, but that
Your
wild turns
social
into
life.
bad decisions.
Yeah, this is yes.
Right? So,
I guess talk to me about like, so much of, a challenge when you first stop drinking is your social life, right? So talk to me about your social life. What is the social life of somebody without alcohol?
so yeah, and I'll just go back to compare this a little bit. Part of what I was scared about with letting go of alcohol, to kind of connect these dots, was, I think, intuitively I knew that some of my relationships were kind of superficial, and they were about just going out and drinking, and they were about having a good time, but they weren't about being there for someone when they were sick and in need. I was I was scared of and really unhappy momentarily for 5, 6 years about losing those relationships. Now I'm like, good. Because I was pouring myself into those relationships and it wasn't a two-way street.
Mm.
So I have less relationships now, but I put energy towards reciprocal relationships. And, that I think that's important. But I think that can be part of the challenge with, letting go of alcohol. It's like, well, my whole social life so far has been this. And that has been hard because it's actually forced me to figure out, what do I like? What do I like to do? And that's a conversation I have quite a bit with some of my friends where we're like, what do we like to do for fun? But what I try to remind myself is there's actual joy in that. There's joy in saying, I get to go figure that out at 34 years old, all over again. That's amazing. Like with a childlike wonder. Okay, I'm going to go to a pottery class and I'm going to be awful at it. And it doesn't matter because with all of this, I've let go of feeling like I have to be good at something to enjoy it. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. I'm going to go outdoor rock climbing and it's going to be amazing. And I'm probably going to be awful and people are going to laugh at me. And I'm going to laugh at myself too. Just having the willingness to be like, I'm not totally sure what it's going to look like, but I'm just going to go try things and process of elimination, because otherwise it's thinking, well, I can only do things where alcohol is involved. Well, what if you can just do anything?
Yeah. You're talking, I love that you're talking about channeling that youthful curiousness. What would you say to younger you about alcohol?
So interestingly, I initially was at a friend's house when I was like 14 or 15 and they offered me a drink and I was like, no, I don't drink. And I would have said, don't change how you feel about this and what you think to fit in. That's what I would have said, because I started drinking to fit in.
Wow. That really like hits hard, Tim. How old were you when you started drinking?
Not that long after that. I wasn't any older than 16.
Uh, what is something that you do that I think is the best way to say it? What is something that you do that most people would need a drink to do?
Have a conversation like this. Right?
So fair.
No, I show up in a lot of places and especially as a male, and I share. I really am going to say what I just joked about. I share myself authentically. I show up as I am, and the more I do it, the more it like lifts weight off of me. Because there's this, right, like just with what I just said about, I started drinking to fit in. And I'm so glad you asked that because I hadn't thought about that for so long. I hadn't thought about like that first drink I had in so long. And there's so many other parts of that, but so much of my life is about fitting in. And I let go of myself in order to please others, in order to be who other people thought I should be. And to be able to just show up as I am. And even if someone else doesn't love it, I'm like, well, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. And love that. And feel like the more authentic I am, I know there's other people who are, at least my hope is that they're going to say, maybe I can do that too. Because I know that there's so many people out there who feel like they have to put on a mask every day and they have to pretend to be someone they're not. And whether or not they're even aware of it, it's making them miserable and it's making them go on this path and they may never they may go their entire life without knowing who they truly are, and that breaks my heart. So that is something that I do now with a passion that I don't know how many drinks I would have needed to even think about doing it before.
Uh, you've listened to the podcast. Um, do you have a favorite episode?
Let me see. I have to I have to look. I've listened to quite a few episodes.
Thank you.
You know, I think I really enjoyed Patricia's. I mean, she's the whole reason I got connected with you. So I would probably have to say hers.
Yeah. She was such a delight, and it's been so fun to just watch her grow and be a mom. And yeah. Uh, so I like to do quick fire, which is just I'm gonna ask you how being undrunken has affected the areas of your life. We have a new wheel of life. It's now an acronym. It's choices. And I'll guide you through what each of those letters are. You game?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So the first one is C. So that stands for circle, your friends. How has being undrunken affected your circle?
Smaller but safer.
H, home. How has being undrunken affected your family, your home life?
It's complicated. I don't fit in as much. But from what we've talked about, that doesn't that, it's made it harder, but it's allowed me to live, I think, the way I'm supposed to live.
More authentically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Occupation. How has being undrunken affected work?
It has allowed me to feel much quicker in my decision making on things and to trust myself.
Mm, love that. Identity. How has being undrunken affected your identity?
I've figured it out. It's revealed it.
That is so well said. Um, the next C, companionship. How has being undrunken affected your love life?
To be determined. Is that an answer? Yeah, to be determined. But I guess I'll elaborate on this a bit. No, we'll come back to that. Let's keep going.
No. Let's elaborate. Squirrel.
I think that this is also part of what can feel complicated for some people that, someone said someone said to me recently, Tim, I think you're single because you don't spend enough time at bars. I can't say it without laughing because I'm like, well, you know, I know people still meet at bars, but I don't know. Like, I try to think about the people who I know who have had long-term relationships or are engaged or are married. I'm like, none of them have met at bars. People don't meet at bars anymore. But I do think that it's a little bit like relationships. If you're not drinking, the dating pool is smaller, but it's kind of like when you get clear on what you're looking for with anything, it's going to get smaller. And so, I'm not someone who, so I'm not going to date someone who goes out 5 nights a week and parties. If my partner
I'm
drinks,
aligned.
that's not a deal breaker for me by any means. But yeah, Vegas every weekend kind of person, no, that's not, because we have to live a common lifestyle. But yeah, it's just there are a lot of people who are at this age are still looking to live that kind of party lifestyle. And so um, there's been a lot of people where I'm like, we have a lot of potential in terms of a relationship, but this just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So to be determined.
To be determined. How about your estate? How has being undrunken affected money for you?
So I've heard this on your other podcasts. So I used to work in finance, so obviously I know how much I was spending on alcohol. I know exactly how much, well, not, I don't anymore, but I used to. Um, so that money's not going there, but I spend a lot to take care of my health. So it's gone from like spending money to potentially deteriorate my health to spend money to positively impact my.
I just love that. And then the last letter in choices, the last wheel, spirituality. How has being undrunken affected spirituality for you?
I yeah, so many ways. It's had a profound impact for sure. I think just with everything we've talked about, um, I'm trying to think of a way to kind of surmise this, but it's had a monumental impact. I I'm a deeply spiritual person. Like I mentioned, I had a call earlier, kind of exploring some elements of this, and um, I think just being able to lift the veil and have less things getting in the way. I've had some, you can call them different things. I call them spiritual awakenings. You can call them mental breakdowns, whatever. Over the past 5, 6, 7 years that have really launched me into having a deeper sort of realization of my spirituality, my purpose, my meaning, who my higher power or what my higher power is. And so I do think removing something that dulls my senses has really allowed that to happen.
What's one question you wished I'd asked, and how would you answer it?
I think sort of it's just touching on the societal norms. I think that would have been a question, however that might be asked around the term sober, um, around the term alcoholic, um, and just how we approach that, how we judge that. I so I don't identify as sober. I kind of live in that gray area. I know a lot of people who are alcoholics, and I think it takes a lot of courage to admit that you have a drinking problem. I have a negative relationship with alcohol. And I have, at least because of the way that I've utilized it in my life. I think that a lot of people, think of those who go to AA in a negative way. I think they have so much courage. I don't think it's easy to take an assessment of your life like that. And I wish more people would get closer to that. Just be curious about, not even be curious about sobriety or alcoholism, just curious about what that is and what that means and what it is that they're experiencing. It's a bit too taboo, and it leads to so much judgment. I mean, we can say this about so many parts of the world and life for so many people, but I think this is just another one that, which is why I'm so glad that you do this, because this is just a safe place that's in that sort of gray and in between. And I do wish our society allowed for a little bit more safety with it. I think because of all the information, especially over the past 8, 10 years around health and wellness and alcohol, that there's more conversations in a big picture about alcohol. I think a lot of the conversations are happening one-on-one. I don't, in those safe spaces, I don't think a lot of people necessarily feel safe to walk away or to, or that the only, like we were saying before, the only way to do it is to identify as this or that. And so, yeah, that's something that I don't want to say weighs on me, but it does bother me, that I wish there were easier ways for people to take a break from alcohol, without feeling like they're going to be judged or that they have to identify as a certain way, and just explore what it means for them. Explore how it would impact their emotional and physical health, their relationship, the choices acronym, how it would affect those parts of their lives.
You've joined the movement. You've shared your story, and I love that you spoke to that so well, because that's exactly my mission, is just to share these stories. Thank you, Tim, so much. I would love for people to be able to connect with you. Where can we find you?
So best place to find me is on Instagram. It's maybe we can, add it in a little note. It's at mind-body business.
Awesome. I will definitely do that. And for sure, when the episode comes out, please share it with your people. I meant what I said. You've joined the movement, and I just want to be able to continue sharing wonderful stories like yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for this space to have this conversation. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
I'm so damn glad you joined me here today. Take care of that gorgeous brain of yours. Make a choice the future you will high five you for. And remember, you don't have to drink to have a fucking good life. See you next time on Undrunken. If this episode hit home, made you laugh, or made you think, do me a solid and share it. You can tag me on Instagram at Undrunken Podcast. I love seeing who's tuning in and what resonates. And if you've got a wild, honest, or beautiful story about ditching booze, or if you just want to come on the show, or if you just want to connect, slide into my DMs or email me. Let's talk.